What's going on, guys? It's Cimoooooooo. So today I'm bringing to you a card discussion on Saryuja Skull Dread. Now this, in my opinion, is the card you should be looking most forward to out of Extreme Force, aside from Heavy Metal Foes Electromite if you're not really a Pendulum player, because this is one hell of a generic Link monster, and you should be really excited about it. But before we get into the discussion, I want to give a big shout out to my newest patrons, as always. So big shout outs to Angel of Steel as well as Discodo. You guys are the reason that this channel is growing strong. And if you guys want to help support me and the channel through Patreon, then check out the link in the description below. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get right to it. So Saryuja Skull Dread is an Earth Link 4 effect monster with 2800 attack and has an effect that reads as follows. It requires 2+ monsters with different names. This card gains effects based on the number of monsters used for its Link summon. 2+. If a monster's is normal or special summoned to a zone this card points to, that monster's gains 300 attack and defense. 3+. Once per turn, you can special summon one monster from your hand. 4. When this card is Link summoned, you can draw 4 cards, then place 3 cards from your hand on the bottom of your deck in any order. So, there's a lot to discuss with this card because it has a lot of really cool effects going on, so I want to break each of these down individually, talk about their strengths, and then we're going to talk about some of this card's weaknesses as well. So, let's start off with the fact that it's pretty generic in the fact that it only requires 2 monsters to make with different names. Now, do keep in mind, you still need to equate to a Link 4 monster, so it's basically about as generic and easy to make as something like Firewall Dragon, except they just can't have the same name, which I wouldn't really necessarily say is too likely in the first place, but we're going to get to that a little bit later. Now, starting with the fact that if you make this with only 2 Link monsters, it's going to have the effect that every monster that gets normal or special summoned to a zone that it points to is going to gain 300 attack and defense. Now, this is probably the worst of the 3 effects because it's not bad necessarily. I mean, being able to boost any of your monster's attack up just by a little bit is obviously pretty good, but at the same time, it's not really like anything fantastic, but it's good to know that basically anything coming out of your extra deck as soon as Saryuja hits the field is going to get a little bit of an uptick in power, and sometimes that can make the difference between, you know, winning a battle or maybe being able to, whether or not it's able to be run over by one of your opponent's larger monsters as well. I mean, there's a pretty big difference between 2800 and 3100 if you think about it, and sometimes those numbers actually matter when it comes to whatever deck it is that you might be playing. So again, not the most useful effect, but it's still just pretty much a generically good effect all around. Now that takes us to the 3+ effect. So if you make Saryuja with 3 monsters, you have the ability to special summon an extra monster from your hand once per turn. Now what I love about this effect is that it's not restricted by level or anything like that. You could special summon like a Blue Eyes out of your hand, you could special summon any monster out of your hand assuming it's able to be special summoned, and I think that's really cool. It kind of just adds to the strength of this card because if you're playing Saryuja in a deck that has a lot of very strong monsters that might not be able to be easily gotten out through typical means, because of the fact that this can just special summon anything onto the board, that's fantastic, and now you kind of got some inherent value out of the Saryuja because now you have a much bigger threat on the board as well. But on the other end, you have to realize that you can also summon small monsters that just help you continue to combo off, because gaining the ability of an additional summon is absolutely invaluable. I mean, that's why we play cards like Brilliant Fusion, that's why we play Double Summon. That's basically just this card that helps give you a pseudo extender type play in the fact that you did have to dedicate resources into making it in the first place, but it allows you to keep going, and I think that's what's really cool about this card overall. Also keep in mind, you don't have to special summon it to a Link zone that it points to. You can special summon it anywhere, and while that may not seem like a really big deal, that might matter the further we go into this new era of Yu-Gi-Oh!, especially with column mechanics and depending on what you're attempting to do with any given deck. Now the third and final effect that requires you to make this with 4 monsters with different names is basically the reason why you would play this card at all. The fact that you get to draw 4 cards and then take 3 and put them on the bottom of your deck is just fucking ridiculous. I mean, if you see a card in Yu-Gi-Oh! That says draw 4 cards, you immediately have my attention. And regardless of what the effect is, the fact that I'm going to see anything that says draw 4, it has to be good in some way or another, and then you hope that it is in fact that good. And the fact that Saryuja is actually very easy to summon when you think about it, it's very likely that you're going to be able to pull off the 4 effect because of the fact that there's a very wide variety of 2-card combos that allows you to summon Saryuja to the field and allow you to take the best advantage of that 3rd and final effect. For instance, there is the Predaplant Orphis Scorpio plus any monster combo. I mean, that's probably the most, I would say, commonly known way to summon this. I mean, as long as you have Scorpio and a monster, you're able to bring out Darling Tonia Cobra, you get your Brilliant Fusion. Brilliant Fusion summons Seraphonite. Most notably, you're probably going to send Trick Clown, which gives you your 4th monster. And there you go, that's 2 cards. But you can also do it with something like Gofu and maybe 1 extra monster that you have, or even Instant Fusion. You can do it with Scapegoat and another monster. Like, there's so many different ways to access this just utilizing 2 cards, especially thanks due in part to the extra deck being able to manipulate the names of the monsters we have on the field, especially now that Link Kuriboh is going to be legal here in the TCG very soon. That means that it's going to be much easier to get monsters on the field with different names, but because of generic stuff like Proxy Dragon as well, it's really not that hard to get 4 monsters on the field with different names, especially when you consider the fact that whatever deck that you're playing is able to produce all of these different names as well. So you have to think, if you only use 2 cards in your opening 5 to summon the Saryuja, so that means you're going to be drawing 4, bringing your hand size to a total of 7. And this is where this card gets insane, because now you're able to pick out of those 7 cards the 4 that you want to keep. And that's what's really cool too, is that you get to keep 1 of them. So it's kind of the way that how Saryuja replaces itself, is that you get that extra card to keep by making it with 4 different monsters. So rather than ending on 3 cards, you're going to end with 4. You're going to be able to sculpt your hand in a way to engineer it that's going to be the best for whatever given situation. If you want to dig for hand traps, you can dig for hand traps. If you want to dig for combo extenders, again, like the aforementioned Brilliant Fusion or maybe Instant Fusion or whatever it is that you may need, that's what this card allows you to do. Going 4 cards deep into your deck is actually a very substantial number when you think about it, and having that access to pretty much get to the cards that you want to get to, and then remembering the fact that you also have its 2nd effect, which allows you to special summon a monster, means that you're able to use Saryuja in a lot of really interesting and innovative ways. So when you take it all together, this seems like one pretty badass Link monster, but I do want to mention that there are a couple downsides to this card that you definitely want to keep in mind as well. First off, the first effect of Saryuja, where it has the ability to boost the attack values of your monsters, is a mandatory effect, and it's also an effect that activates, meaning that this card is very susceptible to Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. And the worst part about this is that Saryuja has a link arrow pointing towards your opponent going up. So meaning, let's say they happen to draw the Ghost Ogre for their 6th card going 2nd, they could summon a monster in the zone that Saryuja is pointing towards. Saryuja is going to trigger, which will give the monster the 300 attack, but then they can just Ghost Ogre it right then and there. It's still going to get the attack value because it has to resolve, but it's going to remove the Saryuja from the field. Now, by that point, has it served its purpose? Probably, but at the same time, it's very susceptible to a card like Ghost Ogre, just as much as it is Ash Blossom, because of the fact that its draw effect is also able to be Ash. But I think Ghost Ogre is a little bit more effective because it not only deals with the threat, but also removes Saryuja from the field entirely, and then you're not having to stare down a 2800 body. However, I think the biggest issue I have with Saryuja as a whole is the fact that you want to make it with 4 different monsters, right? And I have no issue with that, but I think the issue is, if I'm going to commit that number of resources in particular to a card like this, I think it's a bit unfortunate that it doesn't really offer any disruption in the card itself. It doesn't really have a presence once it's already fulfilled its job of drawing me 4 cards and putting 3 back on the bottom of my deck. Sure, it might help me establish a very powerful board depending on the way my hand shapes up, but at the same time, it doesn't really offer any protection for itself other than really kind of pumping up my other monsters by a little bit of of extra value, it doesn't really do anything that's kind of intimidating for my opponent to deal with. And I think it's a little bit counterintuitive because of the fact you want to invest so much into a card like this, but then at the same time, it doesn't really have that big payout for doing so. And I think that there's other cards that do a better job at this, but those other cards also aren't drawing you 4 cards deep into your deck. So you could make the argument that, I guess, the protection aspect of a card like Saryuja is the fact that you're able to dig 4 cards deeper, maybe get into trap cards, maybe get into hand traps, whatever the case may be. That's kind of its defense mechanism, allowing you to get to those cards that you need to maybe help further protect it and really gain the full value out of its first and second effects after taking full advantage of its third effect. But guys, those are just my thoughts. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think about Saryuja Skull Dread as a whole. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. I think this card is awesome. The artwork's badass. I mean, the effect is insane. It might not be, you know, the most intimidating card for your opponent to stare down, but when they see you having 4 monsters with different names and linking up into this guy, that's something in the back of their mind they're going to be like, oh shit, this could get really bad really fast. So guys, thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always. Subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. And if you found this video helpful, consider backing me on Patreon, because just by pledging only $1 a month, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.